kind of a bit too, because it's like PED's fee schedule, and so we came up with something and approach it.
see.
But I want to.
Yeah, that is you.
He's reaching out to me.
Mayor Krupke's on there.
So I'm trying to understand
Okay,
what
we'll have
the
to hold it down.
concern is, because I thought we had gotten
I
it.
feel like you got this.
One thing on the
It's-
agenda, right?
Yes, the mechanism to memorialize the exemption, so is it just a matter of water's interpretation and basically decides?
Well, it is after 4 o'clock.
Okay.
And so seeing a quorum of the climate subcommittee, climate action subcommittee, I'll call this meeting to order. Would the recording secretary, Montana, please call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Okrepke is absent. Councilmember Ben Willows.
Here.
And Chair Fleming.
Here, thank you.
Thank you.
That'll move us on to item 2, remote participation under the Brown Act. We have no members of the committee wishing to participate remotely, so we'll move on to item 3, approval of minutes. Do we have any amendments to the minutes?
Okay.
Great. Is there anybody wishing to make comment on the minutes? Okay. So seeing none, we will adopt them as submitted. Thank you very much. Item 4 is public comment on non-agenda items. Items which fall under our jurisdiction or within the scope of this body, but are not listed on today's agenda. Do we have anybody wishing to make comment on non-agenda items?
Yeah.
Michael, please go ahead.
I think I'm the only, am I the only?
You're the
Yeah.
only member of the public here.
Yeah, that speaks to a little bit to what I want to talk about. And that is, in my volunteer work, I work with a lot of young folks. And I tell them about the subcommittee meeting. And they don't want to come. And some of that is frustration that behind the scenes, I know a lot of people are doing good work. Community doesn't hear about it. So they don't want to come and hear machinations going on and then no action. And it only has to be small action, but to have a snippet in the news or your newsletter, city newsletter would really go a long way. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I want to give kudos to both of you for voting consistent with the climate emergency resolution to vote against expanding existing food plants for gas stations. I think that is so key, and to not vote that way is just sending a lot of the wrong message, in my opinion, in terms of why we're here. At the last subcommittee meeting, I asked if we could put on the agenda green approaches or nature-based solutions for climate reduction. And I think Jeff said, yeah, he'd try and do that. I didn't see it on the agenda. So I just want to reiterate, we could have a speaker come from our volunteer group, Rooted in Community, somebody from Daily Acts, somebody from Permaculture Artisans, to really explain the benefits of urban agriculture, regenerating land, planting trees, native plant gardens. And in that regard, we've been working actually with the parking department at lot 7, and we took out all the invasive privets and we put in 2 native plant gardens. And we tore them out. They came by, took the debris out. They brought some chips for us. We brought the compost and put down cardboard, regenerated the soil. And then we just recently planted all native plants. So getting some recognition in that goes a long way, because we had a lot of young volunteers come. And I'm going, hey, you got to go to the climate subcommittee meeting and really speak out. So I already went there with that. And I think it's even more important when the national lexicon for climate change has really disappeared. And that just doesn't stay at the federal level. It trickles down at the state and local level, because there's not really a lot of public conversation around climate change. And young people are really concerned and anxious about this, and I would be too. So again, that gets back to community engagement, and I don't know if that's in Ada Horte's wheelhouse. If you send it over to her, she came by our volunteer project at 7th Street. We talked a lot about this stuff. But to get that out is super important. Otherwise, you're just, the good work you do is never seen, never heard. Okay.
You know, we can't get into back and forth, but what we should do is, you know, you and I can have a sidebar after this committee meeting about next steps, and that seems to me to be appropriate.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Seeing no additional members of the public present, we will move on to item 5, department reports.
Yeah, I just have one. You both have gotten seed packets and there's some available for the public, but we have our annual Earth Day event on April 25th, 2026 from noon to 4. You both will get the presentation on April 7th. So a few weeks before the actual event, but there'll be food, performers and all that fun stuff. So it'll be a great event.
This is always a really exciting event for the community. Great job always done by our water department and our staff. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee?
No. I know I'm a committee of one, or two. No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the presentation at our meeting and also the day. So yeah, this sounds exciting. Thank
See you
you.
both there.
Yeah. And now we'll open it up to public comment.
A question, do we contact you for booth signups, or is that?
Yeah, you can find all that info at srcity.org/Earth Day.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, we will now conclude public comment and move on to item 6, which is new business. And we are going to hear from, hopefully I'm gonna get your name right, Alicia Quilici.
Yeah.
10 out of 10, good job. So she is going to present with us about the transit-oriented communities policy, and we are all so excited to hear about this.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Amy Nicholson now, who is going to present. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Good afternoon. Chair Fleming and Council Member Van Willis, Amy Nicholson, Supervising Planner. Today's presentation is focused on what's called Transit-Oriented Communities Policy. So this was adopted by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And I wanted to share a bit about what the policy includes and how it aligns really with the work related to meeting our climate goals. So just as a little bit of background here, this policy was adopted by MTC back in 2022 with a focus to implement the Plan Bay Area, which is their sort of long-range plan, which applies to the 9-county Bay Area. One of the purposes of this policy is to help evaluate different jurisdictions and their competitiveness for grant funding that MTC provides. So one example of a grant that Santa Rosa has been really successful with is the One Bay Area grant, also called OBAG. In the last funding cycle, the city received over $13 million that has been applied to infrastructure projects, in particular, those that pertain to active transportation. And so it's really important that the city is able to score as highly as possible in meeting this various criteria in order to remain competitive for future OBAG funding cycles, as well as any other planning grants that are made available. So when we talk about transit-oriented communities, those are defined by the policy. In the case of Santa Rosa, we have 2, and they're based around the SMART station. This slide here shows the north station with the star, and then the 1.5 mile buffer around that station. Any of the transit-oriented communities policies as required by MTC would be applicable at a minimum to this area within the yellow circle. You'll also see a red boundary on this graphic, and so that shows the boundaries of the North Station area specific plan. And so you can see that it extends much further east across 101 and further south. And so part of the question as we move forward with these efforts is thinking about if these new policies would apply just to the broader specific plan area or just within that circle. The second transit-oriented community is based around the downtown smart station. So again, you can see here the TOC boundary in yellow and then the gray map, which shows the entire specific plan area for the downtown station area specific plan. I won't go into a ton of detail on the transit-oriented communities policy, but I just want to provide kind of a high-level overview of the 4 different components, talk about how it relates to our climate action goals, and then share a little bit more detail as we move forward, but I certainly don't want to be overwhelming with information, and I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions. So there are really 4 categories that are covered in TOC policy. One relates to minimum residential density and commercial office intensities for new development, and this would be in both TOC areas. The next category looks at policies for affordable housing and commercial stabilization. There's another section related to parking management, so we're talking about essentially discouraging vehicle parking and encouraging more bicycle parking. And then the final category covers transit station access as well as circulation. So as you can imagine, a lot of this work is very aligned with the city's greenhouse gas reduction strategy and achieving our climate goals through really focusing more intense development where there is already access to the smart station as well as increased city bus frequency. And then also focus on any type of active transportation, being able to provide additional methods for people to move about, reducing our carbon emissions from transportation. So I just have a slide for each of the 4 categories here. And so I'm going to provide a brief overview of the work that we will need to do as we move forward to score as high as possible, which is called fully compliant with MTC's guidelines. And I want to reiterate that this is really a city-wide effort. So planning is working on several components alongside housing staff as well as our transportation and public works staff. So as it relates to residential density and office intensity, the North Station area will require some land use changes. And what that will do is increase the minimum residential density kind of overall for that area, which will require us to update our North Station area specific plan. So that plan was adopted by the City Council back in 2012. We were fortunate to receive a $300,000 grant from MTC to do that work. So really the primary objective is to ensure that we're meeting the density requirements under TOC policy, but we have the opportunity to obviously focus on circulation, access to the smart station as a part of that effort, and various other important specific plan considerations as we move through the process. We are just limited to that $300,000 grant. And then the downtown station area specific plan, fortunately, meets MTC's requirements, so we will not need to do an update to that plan, which is much more recent as well. So the affordable housing and commercial stabilization category is a bit more complicated. There are 3 different buckets of affordable housing policies. There's production, preservation, and protection. The city has a lot of affordable housing policies that either meet the criteria or are close, but there are several policies that we will have to adopt or amend in order to be fully compliant with TOC policy. We didn't receive any grant money for this effort, so we will be relying on city staff in both planning and housing to accomplish the work required here. We have been fortunate to be able to work with MTC staff who have been able to provide some technical assistance, like a model ordinance, for example, to help reduce the staff time required to comply here. And then just a note that the commercial stabilization policy is met through an existing program that we have in our economic development division. Parking management is kind of a big category. As I mentioned earlier, it focuses on both vehicle and bicycle parking minimums and maximums. I want to highlight that state law actually does not allow any parking minimums to be applied for new development in either station areas unless the city makes a very specific finding that there would be an adverse impact to public health and safety. So we don't need to do any work to establish changes to our parking minimums, but what would be new would be adding parking maximums in addition to increasing the minimum bicycle spaces that are required for new development. And there are various other kind of parking related regulations for this section, which the city is almost there, but a little work would be required. The bigger component of this policy area relates to the development of transportation demand management strategies. So this is something that is actually highlighted in our greenhouse gas reduction strategy, that the city would develop those strategies and then require them for any new development. The greenhouse gas reduction strategy speaks about it broadly, so it doesn't define it to these TOC areas. In order for us to get all of the points, we would at a minimum want to provide that requirement within the TOC areas, but with an option to apply to a broader level if requested by council. And then the last area here relates to transit station access and circulation. This graphic here on the slide is showing an example of what's called a mobility hub. And this shows sort of an area where people can park their cars and get on the SMART train or their bikes, or use a bicycle that's part of a bike share program. And there's easy access to city bus. And so one requirement to comply with the TOC policy would be to plan for maybe where this could occur really in both of the station areas. There's some work that we have done that really addresses this, but there's a bit more to do. And so planning again has been working closely with our TPW counterparts on this effort. And then there's also a focus in this section on active transportation. So how pedestrians and bicyclists connect from the SMART station to destinations within the TOC area, including the more intense development. So all that to say, there's kind of a lot of different efforts that are happening simultaneously. The deadline for compliance is sort of up in the air right now, as I know the chair knows, based on being on the MTC commission. What we understand is that we would need to be in compliance by really the end of this year. We need to be able to demonstrate these things are actually in process, and then likely sometime in 2027, these items would be adopted by the council. Because these projects are being managed by different staff and some have consultant help, some will take longer than others, the council will continue to kind of see these spread throughout the next year and a half. And so we wanted to just take this opportunity to provide an overview of the work that's being done and explain how, in many ways, this is helping us to achieve not only what's in our greenhouse gas reduction strategy, but also the general plan that the council adopted last year. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Amy. That was great. Do you have any questions, Councilmember Banuelos?
Thank you. I was just wondering, because you were just talking about kind of, we're not really sure about the timeline, I guess, it sounds like. And it looks like in some areas, we meet I don't know what, the guidelines, I guess, for lack of a better word. And in others, we have some work to do, I think you've indicated. So I'm just wondering, first of all, let me say thank you for this. And also, I loved seeing all of this. I think it's excellent, and it makes me feel like something that our one member of the public mentioned is that we've kind of forgotten about these goals and these things that we're trying to achieve. So it's good to see that a lot of work is going on behind the scenes. So just think that's great. So I'm just wondering, how are you going to go about planning, or can you, given so many uncertainties right now around some of this? Like, I love that we have this plan, but how is it going to roll out, I guess, to the extent that you know?
Sure. So fortunately, from what we understand from MTC staff, there will be some certainty as it relates to the deadline for final adoption of this work and how that relates to future grant funding next month. So it sounds like that we'll know in actually in a few weeks. We're in February now.
Okay, great.
So that's great. And so we've been operating by communicating very regularly with the MTC staff on kind of what's happening with the timeline. And our understanding is that as long as we are making progress and kind of uploading documentation of that we would be okay in meeting the deadline if it's the one that is in place now or one that gets extended. But there has been a lot of planning behind the scenes to ensure that we do meet that deadline, just because it's so critical that we're eligible for all funding opportunities. And so we have a kind of internal working group that everyone sort of has their own assigned areas, and but we are working with that more aggressive target in mind in case it is not extended.
Okay. And just one other really,
If I may.
yes, if you have, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. So just from where I sit in terms of working on this policy, I'm on the small working group, so I feel like I have a pretty good sense of saying that I think that it's pretty unlikely that we will be implementing this in 2026. It's very likely it's going to be in 2027.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that Santa Rosa is pretty far ahead of where many jurisdictions in the Bay Area are. So
It's great.
it's great. But yeah, so I don't think we're in a position that we're looking at losing out here.
Yes, fortunately, we do score pretty highly just without doing any of this work. But to get into like the best situation, there is some work to do. And so we were lucky to get some grant funding to help accomplish some of that work. But yes, we are in a pretty good situation.
Okay. I just had one really kind of dumb question. What is wayfinding?
So that
You have time to look it up.
it's signs really that direct people
Okay.
from one place to another. And so that's something MTC has been invested in, ensuring that people who use transit know how to get to various destinations. So we have a pilot program at our downtown smart station where I think they're like yellow and blue signs, but you'll see them, they look new. And so we were fortunate to get a pilot program from MTC for wayfinding. And so that's really the idea being that people can easily know where they're going if they're, visiting the area in particular.
Thank you. So just one last thing. So some of these things, like where there are zoning changes needed and some amendments, we'll just be seeing those come over time, over the next 2 years, it sounds like. Is that what you're anticipating?
Yes. And so just an update, and we were speaking about this internally ahead of today's meeting. We do plan to bring a study session to the full council. I think we're targeting June, which would provide more of a detailed overview of the work that's underway. And I think there will be some pretty clear decision points or questions for the council, just because this is a lot of policy work and typically we would be interacting with the council to take some direction throughout that process. And so I think when we're at that point, a few months out, we can have maybe more clear timelines as to when you might expect some of these items to be before the council over the next year and a half.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I just would add to this that that I think, like I said, I think Santa Rosa is in a good place. And we're gonna have more information, I think, on February 25th is when the commission will take a vote. And I would just say to anybody who's on staff who's worked so hard on this, or in the public who would like to, that you should contact MTC sooner than later. I've gotten letters from Katati and their mayor. One of the narratives out there for against implementing at this high a level amongst my fellow commissioners is that smaller cities are struggling to meet TOC. So Katati is a great example of one that's doing really well. But if you want it either to be implemented soon-ish so that we can be competitive for having done all this work, or if you want the standards to be high because we can reach them, I am already, pretty supportive of all that stuff, but other commissioners could, or the commission in general would benefit from hearing that. So we'll go to public comment. Do you have any comment?
I had a question, somebody else said, and it was regarding the North Station. You had the circle of influence, whatever you call it, and then there was an expanded footprint. Now, would it enhance your scoring if you expand it out to that larger area? Because then that would incorporate the 101 overcrossing. Because now the circle stops at 101, and obviously the overcrossing goes over to the JC.
So as you know, we're not allowed to get into a back and forth, but what I can do is close public comment. And if you don't have any additional questions,
No.
and then I can go ahead and phrase that question of staff.
Sure. Thank you for the question. There wouldn't be any additional points awarded from MTC if we expanded outside of the yellow circle. But there may be lots of other benefits, like you're referencing, being able to include the overcrossing, and also it would get us closer to aligning with our greenhouse gas reduction strategy if we did broaden various different components of this policy to the entire specific plan area.
Thank you. And I think that that's one of the pieces that gets lost in this at MPC, is that this is a climate initiative. With lots of, arguments about housing and tenant protections, which are really, really essential and important. But the primary goal is to get people to live close to where their transit is. And so thank you for doing all this work. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work. And thank you for you all doing it without complaining. I mean, my fellow commissioners are, opposed because their staffs are complaining to them, and they're trying to, make their staff members happy. And I just am so grateful for all of your work. And I know it's been an incredible.
Well, we have a great team, and it is a great opportunity to work with other departments too. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No. Covers it all.
Okay, well, no more soon. All right, so then we can move on to item 7, future agenda items.
So for the May meeting, there's going to be a conflict with the budget session. So, we don't have any items right now, but if items come up or given direction from you or the council, we can hold a special session if needed.
Okay.
The next meeting would be August 5th.
Okay, I do think that it's probably pretty essential that we figure out a way to meet. Quarterly is probably the bare minimum, and skipping one if we're going to do quarterly is not ideal. But that said, I will make it my business to come up with something important that the community wants to hear from, and I'll be in touch with you all about that.
That sounds good. I agree. I think that's waiting until August is quite a while.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's things happening. So I don't want to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear from Michael and his community folks, what they're doing. I mean, it would make me happy if we had a presentation from them at sometime in May or June. So that would be my recommendation for a potential next meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, comment on item 7.
So
Future agenda.
thanks for adding that to the agenda.
You're quite
Appreciate that.
Okay. With that, we will close public comment and move on to item 8, adjournment. The next meeting of the next regular meeting of the public, of the Climate Action Subcommittee is the first Wednesday in August at 4 p.m.
Correct. Yes.
Wonderful. And we'll follow up with the public around a special meeting in the interim. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.